The drill instructor's stopwatch clicked. Silence stretched across the obstacle course as 200 recruits held their breath. I'd just completed the final challenge in 4 minutes and 37 seconds, a full minute faster than the previous base record that had stood for 12 years. But all I could hear was my father's voice echoing in my head, "You'll never make SEAL, Marcus. You're not built for it." I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Growing up in Buffalo, New York, I was the kid who got picked last for everything. While my older brother Jake dominated high school football and wrestling, I spent most afternoons getting stuffed into lockers by guys half his size. At 5'6" and barely 120 pounds soaking wet, I looked more like I belonged in the debate club than anywhere near military service. My father, Commander William Hayes, had served 22 years in the Navy. His study was a shrine to military excellence, medals, commendations, and photographs of him standing proud with his SEAL team brothers. Jake was already following in his footsteps, having just graduated from the Naval Academy with honors. Then there was me, Marcus Hayes, the disappointment who couldn't even do 10 push-ups without collapsing. The breaking point came during my senior year of high school. I'd been working up the courage for months to tell my father about my decision to enlist after graduation. I found him in his study one evening, polishing his trident pin, the symbol every SEAL earns upon completion of training. "Dad," I started, my voice barely above a whisper. "I've been thinking about my future, and I want to join the Navy. I want to try for SEAL training." He looked up from his pin, and for a moment, I saw something flicker across his face, surprise. Maybe even hope. But then his eyes traveled over my scrawny frame, and his expression hardened. "Marcus, son, you need to be realistic." He set down the pin carefully. "SEALs are the elite of the elite. They're warriors forged from steel and determination. You can barely handle carrying groceries up the stairs. But I could train, get stronger. It's not just about strength." His voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. "It's about mental toughness, leadership, the ability to push through when everything in your body is screaming to quit. I've seen grown men twice your size with years of military experience, wash out in the first week of Hell Week." He stood up, walking to the window that overlooked our backyard where Jake was doing his evening workout routine. "Look at your brother. That's what a future SEAL looks like. A natural athlete, born a leader, never backs down from a challenge. You?" He turned back to me, and I saw pity in his eyes. "You'll never make a SEAL, Marcus. Find something more suited to your abilities. Maybe logistics or communications. There's no shame in supporting roles." Those words hit me like a physical blow. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, watching him return to polishing his pin as if I'd never spoken. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, his words playing on repeat. "You'll never make a SEAL." But instead of crushing my dreams, something unexpected happened. A fire ignited in my chest, a burning determination I'd never felt before. I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to prove him wrong, no matter what it took. The next morning, I began what I privately called Operation Prove Dad Wrong. I started with the basics: push-ups, sit-ups, running. That first day, I managed 3 push-ups before my arms gave out. I could barely run to the end of our street without gasping for air. But I didn't quit. Every morning at 5 a.m., before anyone else was awake, I was out there. Rain or shine, snow or heat, I pushed my body beyond what I thought possible. I researched SEAL training requirements obsessively, studying every aspect of what would be expected of me. I learned about the physical standards, the mental challenges, the leadership tests. Months passed. My body began to change, slowly but surely. Those 3 push-ups became 10, then 20, then 50. My morning runs extended from 1 block to 1 mile, then 3, then 5. I started swimming at the local pool, working on the strokes and endurance I'd need for the water portions of training. My father noticed the changes but never commented. I'd catch him watching me through the window sometimes during my morning workouts, but he never said a word. Jake was more direct. "What's gotten into you, little brother?" he asked one evening after watching me bang out 100 push-ups in the backyard. "Are you trying to impress some girl?" I just smiled and kept training. Let them think about what they wanted. I had a goal, and nothing was going to stop me from reaching it. By the time I graduated high school, I was a different person. I'd gained 30 pounds of solid muscle, could run a 6-minute mile, and had developed a mental toughness I never knew I possessed. When I walked into the Navy recruiter's office, Petty Officer Rodriguez looked me up and down with approval. "You want to go for SEAL training, son? I like your chances." The night before I shipped out to boot camp, my father pulled me aside. We stood in his study, surrounded by all those symbols of military excellence I'd grown up admiring. Marcus, he began, and for a moment, I thought he might finally offer some encouragement. I know you've been working hard, and I'm proud of your dedication. But SEAL training, it's unlike anything you can imagine. The dropout rate is over 80%. I just don't want to see you get your hopes up only to face disappointment. I looked him straight in the eye. Dad, I appreciate your concern, but I'm going to make it. And when I do, I'm going to be the best SEAL this Navy has ever seen. He sighed, shaking his head. I hope you prove me wrong, son. I really do. Boot camp was tough, but after months of self-imposed training, I found myself excelling where others struggled. I graduated second in my class and received orders to report to Naval Special Warfare Preparatory School in Great Lakes, Illinois. The first step toward SEAL training. The day I arrived at Great Lakes, I called home to share the news. My mother was excited, asking a million questions about my quarters, the food, my fellow sailors. When she handed the phone to my father, there was a long pause. So you made it to prep school, he said finally. That's good, Marcus. But remember, this is just the beginning. The real test hasn't even started yet. I know, Dad. But I'm ready for whatever comes next. Another pause. We'll see. As I hung up the phone, I realized that proving myself to my father was only part of my motivation now. Somewhere along the way, this had become about proving something to myself, that the scrawny kid who used to get stuffed in lockers could become something extraordinary, standing on the base at Great Lakes, looking out at Lake Michigan. I thought about the journey that had brought me here. From that humiliating conversation in my father's study to this moment, I'd transformed myself completely. But as I would soon learn, the real transformation was just beginning. Naval Special Warfare Preparatory School was designed to weed out the dreamers from the warriors. The instructors made that clear on day one when Chief Petty Officer Thompson gathered our class of 47 hopefuls in the gymnasium. Look around, Thompson barked, his voice echoing off the walls. Statistically, only 12 of you will make it through basic underwater demolition/SEAL training. The rest will quit, get injured, or simply discover they don't have what it takes. The next 8 weeks were a preview of hell. We started each day with a 4-mile run at 0500, followed by calisthenics that pushed our bodies to failure. Pool workouts tested our swimming endurance while instructors threw every obstacle they could imagine at us. But the physical challenges were just the beginning. Hayes, Thompson's voice cut through the chlorinated air of the pool facility. I'd just completed my second underwater lap, lungs burning from oxygen deprivation. Your technique is sloppy. You're wasting energy with every stroke. He was right. While I'd built up my strength and endurance over the past year, my swimming still needed work. That evening, I stayed after hours, practicing in the pool until my shoulders screamed. A few other candidates joined me, guys who understood that average wasn't good enough here. One of them was Danny Rodriguez from San Diego, a former college wrestler who'd enlisted specifically for SEAL training. Unlike me, Danny looked the part, broad shoulders, thick neck, the kind of natural athleticism that made everything look effortless. You know what I like about you, Hayes, he said one night as we worked on our underwater recovery techniques. You don't quit. Half these guys are here because they think it'll look cool on their resume. You're here because you belong here. I appreciated the confidence, but I wasn't sure I belonged anywhere yet. Every phone call home reminded me of that. How's the training going, honey? My mother would ask. It's challenging, but I'm keeping up. Then my father would get on the line. Remember, Marcus, there's no shame in recognizing your limitations. If you need to reconsider your path, we'll support whatever decision you make. His words were meant to be supportive, but they felt like tiny daggers. Each conversation strengthened my resolve to prove him wrong. The final test at prep school was the combat swimmer stroke evaluation, a 2-mile ocean swim that had to be completed in under 90 minutes while wearing full gear. The morning of the test, Lake Michigan was rough, with 4-foot swells that made visibility nearly impossible. This is voluntary, Chief Thompson announced as we stood on the dock in our wetsuits. Anyone who wants to wait for calmer conditions can do so, but you'll be recycled to the next class, which means starting prep school over from the beginning. Not a single candidate stepped back. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The water was brutally cold, even through our wetsuits. Within the first quarter mile, 3 guys were pulled from the lake showing signs of hypothermia. By the halfway point, we'd lost 8 more to exhaustion or panic. I found my rhythm around the 1-mile mark. My stroke technique, refined through those extra hours in the pool, was keeping me moving efficiently through the choppy water. But the real battle was mental. The cold was trying to convince my brain to shut down, to just stop fighting and let the rescue boats pick me up. That's when I heard my father's voice again. you'll never make a SEAL, Marcus. The anger that had fueled my transformation reignited. I pushed harder, my stroke rate increasing as I pulled through the dark water. When I finally touched the finish buoy, Chief Thompson was waiting with a waterproof stopwatch. 73 minutes, Hayes. Not bad for a kid from Buffalo. I was the 8th person to finish out of the 22 who completed the swim. More importantly, I'd earned my spot in the next phase of training. 3 weeks later, I reported to Naval Amphibious Base Coronado in San Diego, the home of Basic Underwater Demolition/SEAL Training, or BUD/S as everyone called it. Walking through those gates felt like entering a different world. This was where legends were made, where ordinary men discovered if they had what it took to become Navy SEALs. Our class, BUD/S Class 247, consisted of 165 candidates from all over the country. We had college graduates and high school dropouts, former athletes and computer programmers, guys who'd wanted to be SEALs since childhood and others who'd stumbled into the program by accident. The instructors wasted no time establishing the hierarchy. During our first muster, Instructor Martinez laid out the brutal statistics. Gentlemen, welcome to the pipeline that will either make you a Navy SEAL or send you back to the fleet with your tail between your legs. Over the next 6 months, you'll face 3 phases of training designed to test every aspect of your physical, mental, and emotional capabilities. He paced in front of our formation like a predator sizing up his prey. Phase 1 is 8 weeks of physical conditioning culminating in Hell Week, 5.5 days of continuous training with a total of 4 hours of sleep. Phase 2 focuses on combat diving and underwater operations. Phase 3 covers land warfare and small unit tactics. A hand shot up from the 3rd row. Instructor Martinez, what's the average dropout rate? Martinez smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Last year, we graduated 23 SEALs from 6 classes. You do the math. That first week, we lost 12 guys. Some quit during the initial physical screening test when they realized the standards were higher than anything they'd experienced. Others were dropped for medical reasons or performance failures. I found myself in the middle of the pack, not the strongest, not the fastest, but consistent. My background of self-imposed training was paying dividends. While others struggled with the transition to military-level fitness standards, I was adapting steadily. The real test came during week 3 with the introduction of surf torture, a exercise where we'd lie in the freezing Pacific surf for extended periods while instructors questioned our commitment to the program. Why are you here, Hayes? Instructor Davis shouted over the crashing waves as I shivered in the 60-degree water. To become a Navy SEAL, Instructor Davis. Are you sure about that? Because you look like you'd rather be home in mommy's warm kitchen right now. The water was so cold it felt like thousands of needles piercing my skin. My teeth were chattering uncontrollably, and I could feel my core body temperature dropping. But I'd trained myself to push through discomfort, and this was just another test. I'm exactly where I want to be, instructor. After 30 minutes in the surf, half our class was showing signs of hypothermia. But when the whistle finally blew, I stood up under my own power, ready for whatever came next. That evening, Danny Rodriguez found me in the barracks, sitting on my rack and writing a letter home. Telling your family how much fun you're having, he joked. Something like that. I sealed the envelope addressed to my father. Inside was a simple message: still here. Still fighting. Week 3 complete. I never got a response to that letter, but I kept sending them anyway. Each week, a brief update on my progress. No requests for encouragement, no complaints about the training. Just proof that I was still standing when others had fallen. Week 4 brought the log PT sessions, exercises where teams of 7 men had to carry, lift, and manipulate 200-pound telephone poles while instructors screamed commands. The logs were designed to teach teamwork under extreme stress, but they also revealed character in ways no individual test could. My boat crew consisted of Danny Rodriguez, a quiet farm kid from Iowa named Tyler Bennett, 2 former Marines, Jackson Miller, and Kevin Torres, a college football player called Brian Walsh, and surprisingly, the son of a Navy admiral, Christopher Sterling. Sterling had arrived at BUD/S with an attitude that his family name would carry him through. The logs quickly taught him otherwise. Sterling, your daddy's stars don't mean anything here. Instructor Reeves bellowed as our crew struggled to keep pace with the others during a 2-mile log run. Either pull your weight or ring the bell. The bell? That brass bell mounted on a post near the grinder where we did our calisthenics. 3 rings and you were out, no questions asked, no second chances. By week 4, we'd heard that bell ring 47 times. I can't do this anymore, Sterling gasped during a water break. His hands were raw and bleeding from the log, and defeat was written across his face. My shoulders are destroyed. None of us can do this, Tyler said quietly. The Iowa farm boy had surprised everyone with his mental toughness, never complaining despite being one of the smaller guys in our class. That's the whole point. We do it anyway. That afternoon, Sterling rang the bell. As he walked away from the training compound with his gear bag, I realized something had shifted in our boat crew. We weren't just 7 individuals anymore, we were becoming something stronger. The instructors noticed too. During week 5's underwater knot tying exercise, Instructor Martinez pulled me aside. "Hayes, your boat crew is starting to gel. But you need to understand something, Bud/S isn't just about individual performance. Leaders emerge when things get tough. Are you ready for that responsibility?" I wasn't sure what he meant until Hell Week arrived. Hell Week started on Sunday night with Breakout, the most chaotic, disorienting event I'd ever experienced. Instructors in camouflage paint and Halloween masks descended on our barracks at 2 a.m., firing machine guns loaded with blanks, throwing smoke grenades, and screaming contradictory orders. Everyone outside. Move, move, move. Hit the surf. Full gear. Low crawl to the obstacle course. The next 5.5 days blurred together in a haze of exhaustion, cold, and constant motion. We averaged about 50 minutes of sleep per night, grabbing power naps during medical checks or chow breaks. The instructors pushed us through evolutions designed to break our spirits, boat races in freezing surf, log PT sessions that lasted for hours, combat conditioning courses that left us crawling. By Tuesday morning, our class of 165 had shrunk to 89. The bell rang constantly, sometimes individual candidates, sometimes entire boat crews deciding they'd had enough. The worst part wasn't the physical punishment. It was the mind games. During Wednesday nights, Steel Pier Evolution, we had to lie in the surf while instructors walked among us, whispering offers of hot chocolate, warm beds, and an end to the misery. "All you have to do is ring the bell, Hayes," Instructor Davis said, crouching next to me as waves crashed over my shivering body. "Your father was right, wasn't he? You're not built for this. There's no shame in recognizing your limitations." Those words, my father's words, spoken by an instructor who'd obviously read my file, hit harder than any physical challenge. For a moment, I felt my resolve wavering. I was so cold I couldn't feel my fingers. My muscles were cramping from exhaustion. Maybe my father had been right all along. Then I heard Danny's voice from somewhere to my left. "Stay strong, boat crew. We're all in this together." Tyler's voice joined in. "Hoo-yah, boat crew." Then Jackson and Kevin and Brian, all of us calling out in the darkness, reminding each other that we weren't alone. I found my voice and added it to theirs. Thursday brought the Around the World paddle, a boat race that circumnavigated the entire Coronado Peninsula. Our crew was exhausted, hypothermic, and running on fumes, but something remarkable happened. During that paddle, we found a rhythm that transcended individual limits. Stroke, stroke, stroke. I found myself calling cadence, my voice cutting through the wind and spray. Without consciously deciding to, I'd become our boat crew leader. We finished third out of the remaining 12 boat crews, earning a brief respite from surf punishment. More importantly, we discovered we could push beyond what any of us thought possible individually. Friday morning brought news that rocked our class. During the night, one of the candidates, a guy named Peterson from Montana, had been found unconscious in his rack. Medical determined he'd suffered a severe stress fracture in his femur but had been hiding the injury for 2 days, medicating with ibuprofen and sheer willpower. He was immediately dropped from training and hospitalized. "This is why we have medical checks," Chief Instructor Williams told our assembled class. "Heroes don't hide injuries that could endanger their teammates. Warriors take care of each other." Peterson's story was a sobering reminder that Bud/S wasn't just about proving individual toughness, it was about learning to function as part of something larger than yourself. Friday afternoon brought the final Hell Week Evolution, a 14-mile trek around the island carrying our boats over our heads. By this point, our class had shrunk to 64 candidates. We were all walking zombies, moving on muscle memory and mutual support. Halfway through the trek, Brian Walsh, our former college football player, started showing signs of serious heat exhaustion. His face was flushed, he was stumbling, and his speech was slurred. "I'm fine," he kept insisting, but he clearly wasn't. "No, you're not," I said, making a decision that could have ended my Bud/S career. "Medical check." "Hayes, if you call a medical check, they might drop him from the program," Jackson warned. I looked at Brian, then at the rest of my boat crew. These weren't just training partners anymore, they were my brothers. Better drop than dead. The corpsman confirmed severe dehydration and heat stroke. Brian was pulled from the Evolution and hospitalized, but he recovered fully. More importantly, he was recycled to the next class rather than dropped completely. a decision the instructors later told me was influenced by how his boat crew had handled the situation. When the final whistle blew on Hell Week, 47 of us remained standing. We'd been through the crucible and emerged as something different than what we'd been 6 days earlier. The instructors gathered us on the beach as the sun set over the Pacific. "Congratulations, gentlemen," Chief Williams said. "You've completed Hell Week. But understand this, you haven't earned your trident yet. This was just the first test. The real training is just beginning." That night, I called home for the first time in over a month. My mother cried when she heard my voice. My father came on the line after a long pause. "Marcus," he said quietly, "I heard from the base that you completed Hell Week." "Yes, sir. 47 of us made it through." Another pause. That's remarkable, son. I'm proud of you." They were the first words of encouragement he'd ever given me regarding my military aspirations. But something had changed inside me during Hell Week. I no longer needed his approval. To know who I was becoming, Phase 2 of BUD/S brought an entirely different set of challenges. While Phase 1 had tested our physical limits and mental toughness, Phase 2, dive phase, was about precision, technical skill, and the kind of underwater operations that separated SEALs from every other special operations unit. The pool at the dive tower became our second home. Instructor Chief Petty Officer Amanda Chen, the first female diving instructor in BUD/S history, ran the dive phase with scientific precision. She'd earned her position through 15 years of combat diving operations, and her reputation for excellence was legendary. "Gentlemen," Chief Chen announced on our first day, underwater, "there are no participation trophies. You either execute perfectly, or you die. In this phase, we'll teach you to be as comfortable 50 feet underwater as you are breathing air on the surface." Our first major test was pool competency, a series of underwater exercises designed to simulate combat diving emergencies. We had to demonstrate we could handle equipment malfunctions, buddy breathing scenarios, and navigation problems while maintaining absolute calm underwater. The exercise that broke most candidates was called pool harassment. Instructors would attack us underwater while we performed tasks, ripping off our masks, turning off our air supply, tangling our equipment. The goal was to solve each problem methodically while fighting every instinct to surface for air. Danny Rodriguez, who'd been rock solid through Hell Week, struggled with the claustrophobic aspects of dive training. During his third attempt at pool harassment, he shot to the surface in a panic, automatically failing the evolution. "Rodriguez, you've got one more chance," Chief Chen told him after he'd recovered from his panic attack. "But understand, if you fail pool harassment again, you're out of the program entirely. No recycling, no second chances." That evening, I found Danny sitting alone on the beach, staring out at the ocean. "You know what the worst part is," he said without looking at me. "I'm not afraid of drowning. I'm afraid of disappointing everyone who believed in me. Danny, you've already proven you belong here. One bad day underwater doesn't erase Hell Week." He shook his head. "Easy for you to say. You make this stuff look natural." The truth was, nothing about BUD/S felt natural to me. Every day was a battle against my own limitations. But I'd learned something important during Hell Week: success wasn't about being the best individual performer. It was about lifting up your teammates when they needed it most. "Tomorrow morning, 0500, I told him. "Meet me at the pool. We're going to work on this together." For the next week, Danny and I spent every free moment practicing underwater problem solving. Tyler Bennett and Jackson Miller joined us, turning our extra training sessions into boat crew events. We ran scenarios, shared techniques, and built each other's confidence in the water. When Danny faced his final pool harassment test, he passed with flying colors. But more importantly, our boat crew had discovered something powerful: we were stronger together than any of us could be alone. The real test of Phase 2 came during Week 12, open ocean diving operations. We were dropped 5 miles offshore, in full combat diving gear, with orders to navigate underwater to a specific beach landing zone. The dive had to be completed in total darkness, using only compass headings and counting kick cycles to maintain course. Our boat crew was assigned to work as a dive pair team. Danny and I would navigate together, while Tyler and Jackson formed the second pair. Kevin Torres had been recycled to the next class after a training injury, leaving us one man short. The water was murky and cold, with virtually zero visibility even with diving lights. 20 feet underwater, swimming on a compass bearing toward an unseen shore, every instinct screamed at me to surface and get my bearings visually. But that wasn't how combat divers operated. We had to trust our training, our equipment, and each other. 30 minutes into the dive, Danny tapped my shoulder and pointed to his depth gauge. We were drifting deeper than planned, a dangerous mistake that could throw off our entire navigation. I signaled for us to adjust our buoyancy and continue on course. An hour later, we reached what should have been our landing zone, but the bottom topography was all wrong. Instead of the sandy beach we expected, we found rocky reef structure. Somehow, we drifted off course. This was the moment that separated SEAL candidates from regular divers. Instead of panicking or surfacing to reorient, we followed our emergency protocols. I pulled out my underwater writing slate and sketched a quick diagram showing Danny my assessment of our position. Based on the current patterns in our dive time, I calculated we were roughly 400 yards south of our target. We adjusted course and continued swimming, burning through our air supply but maintaining discipline. When we finally reached the correct landing zone, Tyler and Jackson were already waiting. They'd faced similar navigation challenges but worked through them systematically. Outstanding performance, Chief Chen told us during the debrief. You demonstrated exactly the kind of problem-solving and teamwork we expect from combat divers. Most importantly, you didn't panic when things went wrong. That dive marked a turning point for me personally. I realized I wasn't just surviving BUD/S anymore, I was excelling at it. The scared kid from Buffalo who couldn't do 10 push-ups had become someone capable of leading combat diving operations in conditions that would terrify most people. Phase 2 culminated with a final exercise called Hydrographic Reconnaissance, a mission to gather intelligence on beach defenses by conducting a detailed underwater survey of enemy positions. It was the most complex dive operation we'd attempted, requiring precise navigation, detailed observation skills, and the ability to remain undetected. Our target was a section of beach defended by role-playing marine instructors equipped with night vision and motion sensors. We had to approach underwater, document defensive positions, and extract without being discovered. The approach took 3 hours of careful swimming in complete darkness. Every sound was magnified underwater, the hiss of our breathing apparatus, the gentle swoosh of our fins, even our heartbeats seemed loud enough to give away our position. 200 yards from shore, we encountered an unexpected obstacle, a patrol boat with active sonar. The rhythmic pinging echoed through the water, and we knew that if we were detected, the mission would fail. I made a tactical decision that would later be used as a case study in dive operations training. Instead of trying to swim under the patrol boat, the obvious choice that most candidates attempted, I led our team in a wide flanking maneuver that took us through a kelp forest. The kelp provided natural concealment from sonar, but it also created navigation challenges. We had to move slowly and carefully to avoid getting tangled in the thick underwater vegetation. What should have been a 30-minute approach turned into an hour-long ordeal, but the strategy worked. While other dive teams were detected and failed the mission, we successfully completed our reconnaissance and extracted without being discovered. More importantly, we demonstrated the kind of innovative tactical thinking that SEALs were known for. Hayes, Chief Chen said after the exercise, that flanking maneuver through the kelp forest was exceptional tactical decision-making. Have you considered that leadership might be your strongest asset? Her words sparked something in me. Throughout BUD/S, I'd been focused on proving I could keep up, that I belonged in the program. But maybe I was capable of more than just surviving, maybe I was meant to lead. Phase 3, land warfare, began with a sobering statistic. Of the 47 candidates who'd survived Hell Week, only 31 remained. The attrition wasn't just from failures. Some had been injured and recycled, others had voluntarily withdrawn when they realized the commitment extended far beyond basic training. Master Chief Petty Officer Samuel Morrison commanded Phase 3 with the authority of someone who'd spent 12 years conducting classified operations across 4 different theaters of war. His weathered face told stories of missions that would never appear in official records, and his standards were impossibly high. Gentlemen, Master Chief Morrison announced during our first muster, everything you've learned to this point has been preparation. This phase is where you learn to be warriors. You'll master weapons systems, small unit tactics, demolitions, and urban warfare. More importantly, you'll learn to think like operators. The transition from underwater operations to land warfare required a complete mental shift. While the dive phase had been about precision and technical execution, land warfare demanded adaptability, creativity, and the ability to make split-second decisions under fire. Our first major test was the weapons proficiency course. We had to demonstrate mastery of multiple firearms systems, the M4 carbine, M249 light machine gun, 48 Malawian Quachas heavy machine gun, and various pistol platforms. But technical proficiency wasn't enough. We had to maintain accuracy while exhausted, under stress, and in degraded conditions. The qualification standard was unforgiving, 90% accuracy on all weapons systems across multiple scenarios. Most military units considered 75% acceptable performance. Hayes, you're up, Instructor Warrant Officer Lisa Park called out during my first attempt at the combat pistol course. She was a former Army Ranger who'd cross-trained with multiple SEAL teams and had a reputation for being tougher than most male instructors. The course required engaging targets at varying distances while moving, taking cover, and reloading under time pressure. I'd never considered myself a natural marksman, but the thousands of hours of training had taught me the value of consistent fundamentals. I started the course steady but not spectacular, hits in the scoring zones but nothing exceptional. Then something clicked during the final string of fire. Instead of focusing on perfect technique, I found myself operating on instinct, the weapon becoming an extension of my body rather than a tool I was manipulating. When the smoke cleared, Instructor Park studied my target with raised eyebrows. "Hayes, you just shot a 97% on one of the most challenging pistol courses in the military. Where did that come from?" I honestly didn't know. Something about the pressure and complexity of the scenario had pushed me into a flow state I'd never experienced before. "Let's see if that was luck or skill," she said, setting up the rifle course. The rifle course was even more demanding, targets from 100 to 600 yards, shooting positions from standing to prone, and a final stage that required engaging multiple targets while low-crawling through an obstacle course. Again, I found that zone where conscious thought gave way to trained response. My breathing synchronized with the trigger press, my sight picture became crystal clear, and each shot felt inevitable rather than hoped for. When the scores were tallied, I'd achieved something unprecedented in BUD/S history, a perfect 100% score on the combined weapons qualification. Not just passing, not just good, but literally perfect execution under the most demanding conditions the instructors could create. "Hayes," Master Chief Morrison said quietly, pulling me aside after the exercise. "In 15 years of running Phase 3, I've never seen a candidate shoot a perfect qualification. You understand what this means?" I shook my head, still processing. What had happened? "It means you might have found your calling. But more importantly, it means your boat crew just gained a weapons specialist who can keep them alive in combat." The news spread quickly through our remaining class. Danny Rodriguez was the first to congratulate me, but I could see something else in his expression: concern. "Marcus, that was an incredible shooting," he said that evening. "But I need to ask you something. Are you starting to think you're better than the rest of us?" His question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you're excelling at everything now. Phase 1, you were solid. Phase 2, you became a leader. Now Phase 3, you're setting records. I just want to make sure success isn't going to your head." It was exactly the kind of honest feedback I needed to hear. The truth was, I had been feeling more confident, but Danny's words reminded me of something important. Individual excellence meant nothing if it came at the expense of team cohesion. "Danny, everything I've achieved here has been because of our boat crew. You guys made me better, and I hope I've done the same for you." He smiled and clapped me on the shoulder. "Just checking, brother. We're all in this together." The next challenge was small unit tactics, scenarios where we functioned as complete SEAL fire teams conducting complex missions. These exercises tested everything we'd learned: physical conditioning, diving skills, weapons proficiency, and most importantly, our ability to operate as a cohesive unit under extreme pressure. Our first mission was a simulated hostage rescue in an urban environment. The scenario involved infiltrating a compound, neutralizing hostile forces, and extracting civilian targets without casualties. We had 30 minutes to plan and execute a mission that would normally require weeks of preparation. I found myself naturally falling into the role of team leader, coordinating our approach based on each member's strengths. Tyler Bennett, with his farm background and patience, became our designated marksman. Jackson Miller's Marine Corps experience made him our point man for room clearing. Danny Rodriguez's wrestling background translated perfectly to close-quarters combat scenarios. During the planning phase, I proposed a three-pronged approach that would utilize everyone's skills while minimizing exposure to enemy fire. But as we began executing the mission, everything went wrong. Our intelligence was deliberately flawed, there were more hostile forces than expected, the compound layout didn't match our briefing, and we encountered unexpected obstacles that forced us to adapt on the fly. Contact left. Tyler called out as simulated enemy fire erupted from an unexpected position. This was the moment that separated trained warriors from BUD/S candidates. Instead of following our original plan, we had to improvise, adapt, and overcome based on the tactical situation in front of us. "Jackson, flank right through the courtyard. Tyler, find elevation and provide overwatch. Danny, you're with me through the main entrance," I called out, making decisions based on split-second assessments. The next 15 minutes were controlled chaos. We moved through the compound like a well-oiled machine, each team member anticipating the other's actions and responding to threats with practiced efficiency. When we reached the hostage room, we executed a synchronized breach that neutralized all hostile forces without injuring a single civilian. Time, Master Chief Morrison called out. Mission complete. During the debrief, he reviewed our performance with uncharacteristic enthusiasm. Gentlemen, what you just demonstrated was exceptional small unit tactics. More importantly, you showed the kind of adaptability and leadership under pressure that defines successful SEAL operations. He turned to me specifically. Hayes, your tactical decision-making during the crisis points kept your team alive and mission-focused. That's the kind of leadership we're looking for. But the most meaningful feedback came from Tyler Bennett during our post-mission discussion. Marcus, I've been watching you evolve throughout this program, he said. You started as the guy trying to prove he belonged here. Now you're the guy making everyone else better. That's what real leaders do. That night, I called home to share the news about my weapons qualification record. My mother was thrilled, asking detailed questions about the training and expressing pride in my accomplishments. When my father came on the line, there was a long pause before he spoke. Marcus, your commanding officer called me today. My heart stopped. Had I done something wrong? He said you shot a perfect weapons qualification, something that's never been done in BUD/S history. He also said you're being considered for an honor graduate when you complete the program. I could hear the emotion in his voice, something I'd never heard before when he talked about my military service. Son, I owe you an apology. I was wrong about your potential. You've become everything I hoped you could be and more. For the first time in my life, I heard genuine pride in my father's voice when he talked about my achievements. But as meaningful as that was, I realized something important. His approval was no longer what drove me. I was doing this for my teammates, for the mission, and for the man I'd become through the process. The final week of BUD/S brought the ultimate test, a comprehensive evaluation that would determine who earned the right to continue to SEAL qualification training. Of our original class of 165 candidates, only 23 remained. We were exhausted, pushed beyond every limit we thought we had, but we were also something none of us had been 6 months earlier. We were warriors. The culminating exercise was called the Crucible, a 72-hour field training exercise that combined every skill we'd learned into one continuous mission. We would conduct amphibious insertions, execute multiple tactical objectives, and demonstrate leadership under the most demanding conditions the instructors could create, but there was one final individual challenge that had become legendary at BUD/S, the Combat Readiness Test. It was a grueling obstacle course that tested every aspect of our physical and mental conditioning: swimming, running, climbing, crawling, and problem-solving under extreme time pressure. The course record had stood for 12 years, 5 minutes and 47 seconds, set by Lieutenant Commander Jake Peterson, who'd gone on to become one of the most decorated SEALs in naval special warfare history. Multiple candidates had come close over the years, but none had managed to break Peterson's seemingly untouchable mark. Gentlemen, Master Chief Morrison announced as we stood before the obstacle course. On our final day, this test is voluntary. Your graduation from BUD/S doesn't depend on your performance here. But for those who choose to attempt it, understand that this course will demand everything you've learned and more. I looked at the obstacles stretching before us: a 500-yard swim in full gear, followed by rope climbs, wall scaling, underwater knot tying, a weapons assembly station, and a final sprint to the finish line. Each section was designed to test a different aspect of SEAL capabilities, and the cumulative effect was meant to push candidates beyond their breaking point. Danny Rodriguez nudged my shoulder. You thinking about trying for the record? The thought had crossed my mind. Over the past 6 months, I discovered capabilities I never knew I possessed. The perfect weapons qualification, the tactical leadership successes, the consistent performance across every phase of training. Maybe I was capable of something exceptional. I don't know, I said honestly. The record stood for 12 years for a reason. Marcus, Tyler Bennett said quietly, you've been surprising everyone, including yourself, throughout this entire program. Maybe it's time to stop being surprised. Master Chief Morrison called for the first volunteer. Jackson Miller stepped forward, attacking the course with the aggressive intensity that had carried him through Marine Corps training and BUD/S. He posted a respectable time of 6 minutes and 23 seconds, fast, but nowhere near the record. 3. More candidates attempted the course, with times ranging from 6:15 to 7:02. All solid performances, but the record remained untouched. Hayes, Master Chief Morrison called out. You're up if you want it. I stepped to the starting line, my heart hammering against my ribs. This wasn't just about breaking a record, it was about proving something to myself, something that went deeper than my father's doubts or anyone else's expectations. Ready? Master Chief Morrison's hand hovered over his stopwatch. I nodded, focusing on the water ahead of me. The 500-yard swim had to be perfect, no wasted energy, maximum efficiency. I'd learned during the dive phase that panic was the enemy of performance underwater. Go! I hit the water with practiced precision, my stroke immediately finding the rhythm I'd developed over months of training. The weight of my gear, which had felt crushing during my first weeks at BUD/S, now felt manageable. My breathing synchronized with my stroke count, and I focused on maintaining consistent pace rather than burning out early. I touched the wall at the swim finish and hauled myself out of the pool, water streaming from my gear. The rope climb station was next, 3 separate ropes, each requiring a different climbing technique. This was where upper body strength and technique merged with mental toughness. My hands found the first rope, and I powered upward using the J-hook leg technique we'd practiced thousands of times. At the top, I slapped the buzzer and rappelled down with controlled speed. The second rope required a different approach, arm-over-arm climbing that tested grip strength and endurance. The third was a vertical wall climb using only rope assistance. By the time I completed the climbing section, my forearms were burning, but I was still on record pace. The underwater knot tying station was next, a test that had broken many candidates during dive phase. I had to swim to the bottom of a 12-foot pool, tie 3 different knots blindfolded, and surface within 90 seconds. The water was cold and murky, designed to simulate combat diving conditions. I descended quickly, found the rope, and let my hands work from muscle memory. Square knot, bowline, clove hitch, each knot had to be perfect or the exercise failed. My lungs began burning around the 60-second mark, but I forced myself to double-check each knot before surfacing. I broke the surface with 5 seconds to spare, gasping but successful. The weapons assembly station was ahead. I had to field strip and reassemble an M4 carbine while blindfolded, then engage targets at varying distances with perfect accuracy. This was where my perfect weapons qualification came into play. My hands moved without conscious thought, muscle memory guiding each motion. Strip, clean, reassemble, load, engage. The targets fell in sequence, and I moved to the final obstacle. The last section was a quarter-mile sprint through varying terrain, sand, rocks, and finally a steep hill that led to the finish line. This was where cardiovascular conditioning and pure mental toughness would determine success or failure. My legs felt like concrete, and my lungs were on fire, but I'd been here before. Every morning run in Buffalo, every surf torture session, every moment when I'd wanted to quit but chose to continue, they all led to this moment. I crested the final hill and saw the finish line ahead. Master Chief Morrison was standing there with his stopwatch, and I could see something in his expression that I'd never seen before, anticipation. I crossed the line and immediately collapsed, my entire body shutting down from the sustained effort. The world narrowed to the sound of my own breathing and the pounding of my heart. Time. Master Chief Morrison called out. I rolled over and looked up at him, unable to form words. 4 minutes and 37 seconds, he said, and the entire training area fell silent. New base record. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity, then erupted into cheers from my fellow candidates and even some of the instructors. I'd broken a record that had stood for 12 years by more than a full minute, an achievement that seemed impossible when I'd started this journey. Danny Rodriguez was the first to reach me, pulling me to my feet with tears in his eyes. "You magnificent bastard, you actually did it." Tyler Bennett and Jackson Miller weren't far behind, and suddenly I was surrounded by the men who'd become my brothers through this crucible. We'd started as strangers, and we were finishing as something stronger than family. Master Chief Morrison approached with an expression I'd never seen from him, genuine respect mixed with something that might have been pride. "Hayes, in 25 years of naval special warfare, I've never seen a more complete demonstration of what it means to be a SEAL. You didn't just break that record, you shattered it. More importantly, you've shown every quality we look for in our operators: physical excellence, mental toughness, technical proficiency, and the leadership to make everyone around you better." That evening, I called home one final time as a BUD/S candidate. My mother answered, and I could hear the excitement in her voice when I told her about graduation and the record. When my father came on the line, there was a long pause before he spoke. "Marcus, I need to tell you something. When you first said you wanted to be a SEAL, I was terrified, not because I thought you'd fail, but because I was afraid you'd prove me wrong about my own limitations. I projected my fears onto you instead of seeing your potential." His voice broke slightly. "Son, you've become everything I always hoped I could be. You've shown more courage, more determination, and more heart than I ever possessed. I'm not just proud of you, I'm inspired by you." The next morning, we stood in formation for the final time as BUD/S candidates. 23 men who'd survived the crucible, ready to pin on the coveted Navy SEAL trident. But as I looked at my classmates, my brothers, I realized the most important thing I'd learned during this journey. I hadn't just proven that the scrawny kid from Buffalo could become a SEAL. I discovered that with enough determination, enough heart, and the right people beside you, any limitation could be overcome. The voice in my head was no longer my father's doubt, it was my own conviction that anything was possible. As Master Chief Morrison handed me my trident, he leaned close and said quietly, "Welcome to the Brotherhood, Petty Officer Hayes. Now the real work begins." I pinned that trident to my uniform and realized my father had been right about one thing: I'd never make SEAL. I'd become something better, I'd become the SEAL I was always meant to be. 3 years later, I stood on the deck of the USS Hampton, a Virginia-class submarine cutting through the dark waters of the Arabian Sea. The mission briefing had been classified at the highest levels. But our target was clear: extract a high-value intelligence asset from a compound deep inside hostile territory. Petty Officer First Class Marcus Hayes, that was my rank now, earned through 2 combat deployments and a reputation for tactical excellence that had spread throughout naval special warfare. The scrawny kid from Buffalo was now the breacher for SEAL Team 3's Alpha Platoon, responsible for getting my teammates through any door, wall, or obstacle that stood between us and mission success. But tonight, I wasn't just the breacher. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell had selected me to lead this operation, my first time as primary mission commander. At 23 years old, I was younger than most SEAL team leaders, but my BUD/S record-breaking performance had been just the beginning of an exceptional career trajectory. "Hayes, final equipment check," came the voice of Senior Chief Petty Officer Robert Kane, our platoon chief. Kane was a 20-year veteran who'd served with some of the most legendary SEALs in naval history. His respect wasn't given lightly, but over the past 3 years, I'd earned it through consistent performance under fire. My gear was methodically arranged: explosives for breaching, specialized climbing equipment for the compound walls, night vision optics, suppressed weapons, and communication devices that would keep us connected across the entire operation. Every piece had been checked and rechecked, because in our business, equipment failure meant mission failure, or worse. "Radio check, Alpha Team," I spoke into my throat microphone. "Alpha 2, good comms," came Danny Rodriguez's voice. He'd graduated BUD/S as our class honor man and had become one of the finest combat medics in the teams. Our friendship had only strengthened through multiple deployments together. "Alpha 3, solid copy," Tyler Bennett responded. The quiet farm kid had evolved into our designated marksman, capable of precision shots at distances that defied belief. Jackson Miller's voice came through next. "Alpha 4, ready to rock." He'd become our communications specialist, managing the complex electronic warfare systems that kept us invisible to enemy detection. Our insertion point was 12 miles off the coast of a country that didn't officially exist on our mission reports. The submarine would surface just long enough for us to launch our SEAL delivery vehicle, a specialized mini-submarine designed to transport small teams undetected to their target areas. "Team leaders to the briefing room," Lieutenant Commander Mitchell's voice echoed through the submarine's corridors. The final briefing was concise but thorough. Our asset was Dr. Elena Vasquez, a nuclear physicist who'd been developing weapons technology for hostile forces but had decided to defect. She was being held in a compound 23 miles inland, surrounded by sophisticated security systems and an estimated 40 enemy combatants. "The window is narrow, Lieutenant Commander," Mitchell explained, pointing to satellite imagery of the target. "Intelligence indicates she's scheduled for transport tomorrow morning. This is our only opportunity." The mission profile was complex: underwater insertion via SDV, overland movement through hostile territory, compound infiltration, asset extraction, and exfiltration to a helicopter landing zone 15 miles from the target. Total mission time, 8 hours from launch to recovery. "Hayes, you'll have tactical command once we hit the beach," Lieutenant Commander Mitchell said. "This operation succeeds or fails based on your leadership." 4 hours later, we were underwater in the SDV, breathing through rebreathers as our pilot navigated toward the insertion point. The vehicle was cramped and cold, but it was invisible to enemy radar and sonar systems. This was the kind of specialized operation that only SEALs could execute. I used the underwater transit time to mentally rehearse every aspect of the mission: beach insertion, movement to the compound, breaching sequence, room clearing procedures, asset location and extraction, movement to the helicopter landing zone. I'd run through these scenarios hundreds of times during training, but live operations always brought unexpected challenges. The SDV surfaced 2 miles off the coast, and we transferred to our combat swimmer mode. The water was rougher than expected, with 4-foot swells that made navigation challenging. But our dive training had prepared us for exactly these conditions. 20 minutes later, we crawled onto a rocky beach in complete darkness. The shoreline matched our intelligence reports perfectly, but that's where predictability ended. Real combat operations were chaos controlled by preparation, teamwork, and adaptation. Alpha Team, we're moving, I whispered into my throat microphone as we began our overland movement toward the target compound. The next 6 hours became a textbook demonstration of everything we'd learned during BUD/S and subsequent training. We moved through hostile territory undetected, bypassed multiple security checkpoints, and reached the compound perimeter exactly on schedule. The compound was more heavily defended than intelligence had indicated. Instead of 40 enemy combatants, we identified at least 60. Instead of basic security systems, we encountered military-grade surveillance equipment and motion sensors. Alpha 1, this is Alpha 4, Jackson Miller's voice came through my earpiece. I'm reading electronic signatures that weren't in our briefing. This place is wired with advanced detection systems. This was the moment that separated good operators from exceptional ones. Our original plan was compromised, but we had a mission to complete and an asset to extract. Alpha Team, we're adapting, I said, making the tactical decisions that would determine success or failure. Tyler, find elevated overwatch position on the north side. Danny, you're with me for primary breach. Jackson, electronic warfare countermeasures. On my signal. What followed was 47 minutes of the most intense combat operations of my career. We breached the compound, neutralized enemy resistance, located Dr. Vasquez, and extracted her without casualties to our team or the asset. But the moment that defined the mission came during our movement to the helicopter landing zone. We encountered an enemy patrol that wasn't supposed to be there, and our extraction was compromised. Alpha 1, enemy contact, approximately 20 combatants, quarter-mile from LZ. Tyler's voice crackled through the radio. I had to make a decision that would affect everyone's survival. We could fight our way through, risking casualties and mission failure. We could find an alternate extraction point, but that would delay recovery and increase exposure time. Or we could use the tactical innovation that had become my signature, find a third option that nobody expected. Alpha Team, we're going underwater, I said, leading our team to a river that ran parallel to our intended route. Combat swimmer. Mode to the alternate LZ. For the next 90 minutes, we moved through rivers and irrigation channels, using our dive training to avoid enemy patrols while protecting our asset. Dr. Vasquez, who had no military training, had to trust us completely as we guided her through water obstacles that would have been challenging for trained operators. When the extraction helicopter finally lifted off with all team members and our asset aboard, I realized something profound. The record I'd broken at BUD/S had been just the beginning. Every challenge since then, combat deployments, leadership responsibilities, complex operations, had been opportunities to prove that excellence wasn't an accident, it was a choice. 6 months later, I received a call that changed everything. My father, now retired from the Navy, had been selected to present the Bronze Star Medal I'd earned for the Dr. Vasquez extraction operation, standing in formation at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, the same place where I'd once struggled through BUD/S training. I watched my father approach in his dress uniform. His chest displayed the ribbons and medals of his own distinguished career, but his expression showed something I'd never seen before, absolute pride in his son's achievements. Petty Officer First Class Marcus Hayes, he said formally, pinning the Bronze Star to my uniform, for exceptional valor and tactical leadership during combat operations. Then he leaned close and whispered, "Son, you didn't just prove me wrong. You showed me what's possible when someone refuses to accept limitations." After the ceremony, as we walked along the beach where I'd once endured surf torture, my father asked the question I'd been waiting years to hear. "Marcus, what's next for you?" I looked out at the Pacific Ocean, where new BUD/S classes were conducting their training, where the next generation of SEALs was discovering their own potential. "I want to become an instructor," I told him. "I want to help other people discover what they're capable of when they refuse to quit." He smiled, and for the first time in my life, I saw my father not as the man whose approval I'd sought, but as someone who'd learned something important from watching my journey. "You know what I've realized," he said. "The day you told me you wanted to be a SEAL, I should have said, 'I believe in you.' Instead, I let my own fears speak for me. You've taught me that the biggest limitations we face are the ones we accept in our own minds." Today, as Senior Chief Petty Officer Marcus Hayes, I stand before new BUD/S classes and tell them something their instructors have been saying for decades: the only easy day was yesterday. But I also tell them something else, something I learned from a scrawny kid from Buffalo who refused to accept that he'd never make SEAL. Every record can be broken. Every limitation can be overcome. Every person who tells you never is giving you the opportunity to prove them wrong. The question isn't whether you're strong enough, fast enough, or tough enough. The question is whether you're determined enough to find out what you're truly capable of. The kid who got stuffed in lockers didn't just become a SEAL. He became the SEAL who showed others that anything is possible when you refuse to quit. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.